record. I'll get into a lot of trouble. Hopefully everyone can see that. Okay, well, let's start. Are you all ready, guys?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, well, listen, thanks everybody for joining today. This is the first Hubspot user group. And for those of you know about Hugs have been going for a while, but this is the first Hug aimed at B2B technology companies like yourselves who are based in the UK. I suppose if you're not based, welcome anyway. That's fantastic that you're joining us. And today we're going to talk about how RevOps can support growth for B2B tech companies like yourself. I'm really excited to get into this with the guys. So let's dig a little bit below the hype and the theory of it. In my eyes, RevOps is really simple. It's just the operations, it's the underpinning, it's the plumbing and the wiring that bring together sales, marketing, customer service, all the people that are contributing to growth and ensuring that they've got everything that they need, whether that is, data, processes, it's technology, it's integrations, all those sorts of things. So I'm really excited about talking more about this today. As I say, a little bit more about Hugs for everybody that's new to Hugs. You might have attended geographical hubs like the London Hug or the Manchester Hug. So we know no bounds geographically. And really the Hug is about bringing people together. There's no selling. We want to have conversations about issues. We want honesty. We want to be able to learn and share things about your experiences, help you grow better in your particular business and in your world. I think, if this was in real life, we'd be having coffee breaks and we'd be chatting to each other. So we'll try and do, please do as much of that as you can with the chat function. But really, this is the beginning of the journey for the B2B Tech Hug. So far, we're going to do 4 this year, and this is obviously the first one. We know we want to do one in October because we want to invariably, when the Inbound conference happens, for those of you that aren't aware of that, every year HubSpot has a huge conference, normally in Boston. It's not going to be in Boston this year, it's going to be virtual, but that's where loads of people get together. They talk about the latest products. We have clients talking about their issues and their case studies and their use cases. So inevitably, there's lots of hugely important information that's going to come out of that. So we're going to have a session in October where we're going to tell you, kind of distill down all the relevant bits for the B2B tech sector. As you can see, we're open-minded about what the other 2 sessions are going to be. So we'd really love it if you guys have got any requests or ideas about what those sessions should cover. Please make sure you just share them in the chat, and my colleagues Katie and Nick will be hosting, and they'll love to get your feedback. So this is the start of a journey, and we really want you to input into it. Very briefly, we are a diamond partner. We're BBD Boom, and we focus on B2B tech companies. We help everybody from those people starting off on their journey with HubSpot, so getting onboarded and getting set up. We work with lots of people who want to optimize what they've already done, and then also to scale. So people who've got HubSpot really working well for them, how do they 10x what they're doing? And that's what we love to do. So we're getting into it now. So the agenda really is talk about RevOps and the B2B tech environment, and then we're going to actually have a demo. There'll be time for questions. Please let us know what your questions are. Put them in the chat and we'll try and answer them. Very briefly, I want to say hello to our speakers. And what's really exciting is we've got Johnny Day. Johnny and I are just going to have a conversation. He's the Chief Revenue Officer of Learnably. Hi, Johnny.
Hi, Adam. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Maggie is going to be taking us through a presentation, and Maggie has been instrumental in helping build out the RevOps function within HubSpot. So she's got a lot of experience that she can share. Hi, Maggie.
Hi, Adam. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. And we've got Jack from HubSpot as well. And what's really cool about Jack, he's going to do a demo. So we've got a conversation, a presentation, and a demo. Hi, Jack.
Hi, guys. How are things? Nice to speak to you, Adam.
Good to speak to you. And Jack's going to be taking us through a new feature of HubSpot called the Ops Hub, which I think is going to be really, really relevant to this conversation. So, Johnny, let's have a chat about RevOps. Now, when I met Johnny, I knew straight away that although he may not use the word RevOps, he is a RevOps person. Obviously, his job title is Chief Revenue Officer. I know from the conversation he loves technology, he loves process, he loves all the plumbing and wiring and the analytics and stuff. So, Johnny, really good to have you on board. Could you just kick off by just telling us a little bit about your past and your present? Like, what's your role? What does a Chief Revenue Officer do at Learnably?
Sure. So I joined Learnably on the 4th of May last year. Literally left my previous job and joined Learnably. Was onboarded into a new business. At the time, it was about 20 people, and was brought on the grounds of building out a sales, marketing, and customer success function. So the CRO role in Learnably is ultimately linked to growth based on where we are as a business right now. But that essentially means optimizing all revenue streams that ultimately line up with our P&L. So we as a business actually have two really distinct revenue lines. One from because we're a marketplace. One from SaaS subscriptions, and the other one from partner relationships. So ultimately, CRO's job is to ensure that we're growing and optimizing our top line revenues in line with our financial business model projections. So that's my overall remit.
Brilliant. So, and you mentioned earlier that obviously you're growing fast. So, I guess just things are moving so quickly internally that getting all that sort of plumbing and wiring sorted out is crucial to success. Yeah,
absolutely. So in the last 12 months, we've grown massively. We're a team of 45 now. So, we've, like all companies, we're a bit guilty of having a little bit too much SaaS across different departments, across different units. And, if anyone talks about scalability in any detail, it's always about repeatability. That's really what people are talking about. And so a lot of what I've been doing is getting into the weeds around plumbing, process, connectivity of tools, best practice, and hopefully in due course that means that we can onboard, we can train people more quickly, and execute at scale, because as a VC backed business you have a target on your head, so you ultimately have to be able to scale and grow quickly, and you need to have your technology set up in a way that allows you to achieve that.
So let's talk about your tech stack then, because I know you've worked with HubSpot a lot, haven't you, in different roles? And when you started at Learnably, I think our conversation on the lines of obviously we want HubSpot to be at the core of that, but we've got all the SaaS things that are there. Where's your head at in terms of the tech stack, MarTech stack?
Sure. So as I said, when I joined, we had HubSpot as a product. We were paying for it as a business unit. We then were very guilty of pretty much only the sales team were using it, and I'm not really sure how that manifested, but we were in that scenario whereby different teams had gone off and chosen different pieces of equipment for various different reasons. Most of them were pretty rubbish reasons, if I'm totally honest. And so one of the things, having done this in my previous role, was we've got to get everyone singing off the same hymn sheet. And the way that I see that is about, it doesn't matter whether you use piece of paper, whether you use Whimsical or Miro or any of these whiteboarding tools, but you've got to document and write down the way that your commercial spine works and the way that all of those departments interact and communicate with each other. And this is something that HubSpot does really, really well, because we have a marketing team or a growth team who are busy running experiments on our website. We're trying to grow our organic traffic, like any small stage business is, and we all know how good HubSpot are at doing that from an inbound flywheel perspective. They blaze a trail in that regard. We needed to get the sales team to fully be armed with the tools that can help them execute at scale, because for sales it's all about the 1% on top of the 1%. So how do we make sure that the sales team have got the competencies to do their job as a salesperson, they've got the skills to do their job as a salesperson, they've got the tools, and they know the processes. Because ultimately what I want as a revenue leader is visibility of who is doing what where in each of my teams. And I need to be able to do that irrelevant of whether I've got 3 people, 15 people, or 100 people, or 1,000 people in my team. I need to have that visibility so I can be data informed to make those decisions. And so the journey we've been on is just around educating people on what the platform can do, encouraging them to go into the learning sections in the likes of HubSpot and take those courses, upskill yourself, be a forward-thinking, progressive learner, and then work together to ensure that each department has the system set up in a way that enables them to be successful and achieve success as an individual, as part of a team, and then also we call it internally the go-to-market team, which essentially is sales, marketing, and customer success. And it's a cyclical relationship because sales, marketing bring the businesses in alongside sales win the business. There's a handover, which is critical. It needs to be documented in one place. And then out of the relationship that you have with customer success comes the stories that go back up to the top of the marketing and the sales team to help you win more business, which kind of links back to that flywheel mentality. So that's how we've kind of gone on this journey with HubSpot to date. And the last part of that puzzle is bringing in things like customer support, customer service, and also our fulfillment function, so that everything is in one place, in black and white, in HubSpot as our central source of truth. Email is email, Slack is Slack, but the customer is king. It sounds corny, and therefore we need to have that visibility in one system, in notes, in tasks. So it doesn't matter if someone goes on holiday, everyone knows what's happening with an individual customer. And so that's the kind of utopia that we are on a journey to working towards.
Oh, wow. I mean, gosh, that's brilliant. There's a lot in there. A couple of things I want to drill down. I love that idea of the commercial spine and that idea of, and it's something we certainly do with clients as well. It's like really sit down with CROs and the team and map out what is the sales process, what are the handoffs, because there's all these key milestones, isn't it? Handoff from marketing, handoff from sales to customer success. So I love that concept of the commercial spine. You've, I guess, probably through the nature of your business, you put a lot of emphasis on learning and education, which I think is fantastic. But I just want to ask about the visibility. So at the moment, where you've inherited all these other tools, how easy is it for you to get the visibility of the key metrics that you need?
I mean, look, we live in a world where there's lots and lots of data. Lots and lots of data. Every system you buy now has analytics and reporting. It's ultimately about being able to drill down into the key metrics that actually drive your leading indicators that drive your business. So we as an organization have a very clear visibility of it's quite often known as our North Star metric. So we know our North Star metric as a business. We know our key drivers, and we know the levers that we need to pull in order to drive the business forward. And we monitor those very, very closely. In terms of how I make sure all of that reporting is pulled together, I think we're on the beginning of that journey. But it's fair to say that we had a team using Trello because it was a legacy thing whereby people wanted to have a column that had their name at the top that showed them which businesses they were looking after. We as a business use Notion as a company wiki, and because that is a tool that has certain functionalities, people start using that, and then they start having stuff in Google Sheets and Google Documents, and all of a sudden you've just got very disparate information that's in disparate systems. And the honest answer is most of those disparate systems integrations are great, but there's always a problem or a challenge. There's always something it doesn't quite do, and it becomes quite one-dimensional. And so Notion's great at being a wiki. It's rubbish at being a CRM if you want to try and scale your business to 100 million of ARR. It's just a fact of life. So don't try and use a tool that's fine if you're a small business trying to run a CRM, but there's lots of manual input. Whereas with HubSpot and with the automation, why am I paying someone in my business to move something from HubSpot in a field in the sales pipeline into a Notion board in a pretend version of the same pipeline? It's bonkers. So this is all about efficiency.
Yeah, and I think you're a really sophisticated CRO, marketing person, salesperson. But I think we deal with a lot of clients who don't necessarily realize what is possible in HubSpot. So for everybody out there, presumably you are using HubSpot, there's been such a ramp up in the reporting side of things, the custom report builder and things like that, where if you can get the information into HubSpot from wherever it is, and now, as Jack will talk about, there's so many more ways of getting data in. I mean, essentially, we're working with clients to use HubSpot as a BI tool, apart from anything else. So we've got a mashup of data in HubSpot, mashup of data coming from externally, and now you've got this BI tool. You don't need other tools. So it's really encouraging to hear you talk about that. I suppose, Johnny, the other thing was where you talked about the 1% on the 1% side of your role. So you're always trying to improve stuff. What I guess the integrations and the passing over of things and the automations, I guess they're really important for that ongoing optimization.
Yeah, they are. I mean, I think for any business, it's about really working out what features in any product helps you run your business to the best of your ability with the simplest view you possibly can. So as a sales leader in a growing business, what's the most important metric for me? Sales conversion closed won. Like, that's the ultimate thing that's just really, really important. I need to have deals in my pipeline as a leading indicator, but ultimately it's about our ability to close businesses. And from there, it's about time to close, because off the back of that, you can model pretty much everything. Sales is a financial calculation. It's a mathematical equation that you can always reverse engineer. So in order to achieve 1% on 1%, you need to know the key metrics to start with. So you need to know, right, what's your average time to close? If I can reduce that time to close by 15, 20%, then I know that I can get that cash in the bank faster. I can then bring that money into the business that I can reinvest in marketing, which means I can bring more business and I can grow more quickly. So my sales efficiency goes through the roof. So I'm always trying to think about how I can just marginally improve. And there's loads and loads of detail that I can drill into if I want to know how much, somebody in my sales team, how many emails they've sent, or how many sequences they've got active, or, how many calls they've made, or how many tasks they've worked with. I can answer all those questions, but I usually only need to solve that problem at the point in time where we're maybe having a one-to-one, or, we're doing a review. So it's actually about picking those top level metrics that you're trying to influence and change, and then working out how you actually go about changing them. And that's the difference between being, having lots of data and being data informed, that helps you to make those decisions that you then work towards to help you deliver the outcomes, which is essentially business growth. Brilliant.
Fantastic, Johnny. That's really interesting. So really, make sure you've got as ever, make sure you're tracking and spending your time on the most important metrics for your business. Now, we are talking about HubSpot a lot here, but it has its limitations, doesn't it? And I think, we're all friends here in the Hub. We all use HubSpot. We're in B2B Tech, but we know it has its limitations. Johnny, what are the things that you find a bit limiting with HubSpot at the moment, or you'd like to see?
So, yeah, the thing that probably frustrates me the most, and it's something that we're working on with you at the moment to implement, is HubSpot's done a very good job of top of funnel and sales process. It's definitely a little bit frustrating, I would say, around the complexities of renewals. It's getting better, but it needs quite a lot of configuration and duplication of information. So I'll give you an example. I sign a business in my sales pipeline, and it's gone through whatever stages you have in your business. It's gone to closed won. At the moment, in order for me to then pass that to another team, we have to duplicate the deal. You have to duplicate all of the associated information into a new pipeline. Attachments don't, sadly, get duplicated. But the thing that's most important in that entire journey, and we actually don't use HubSpot's quoting system. We use a separate tool. Is attachments and information doesn't port that well from deal to deal. So we lose the actual most important thing there, which is the contract and the contracted information, which is usually amounts, dates, timelines, etc. So we're doing some work at the moment to try and capture that information so that we can then power a renewals pipeline. But one of the things that HubSpot is obviously brilliant at is trying to encourage you to think about things that are repeatable. But we're at that stage as a business whereby things aren't perfect. And that means that we sometimes have to flex from standard into imperfect, usually around things like contracting and lengths of time and different pricing. Anything non-standard basically breaks a lot of different systems. And so the renewals aspect of HubSpot could definitely do with some improvement.
Okay. Well, we know that. Maggie, I think Maggie's nodding her head and going, "Yeah, we know. We're working on." The thing that will happen, John, is that we'll come up with a hack, and then about a week later, HubSpot will bring out a new thing that solves it. But that's just that's what happens.
And I think it's so. The reason I think it's so important is if you read a huge amount about SaaS, what's fascinating is everyone's like, "Oh, in order to grow your business, you need loads and loads in the top of the funnel," which obviously you do, but a huge amount of growth comes from your existing customers and your existing customer growth. And we, for example, as a business, work with some of the UK's and now businesses in the US, like hyper growth companies. We've got businesses that when we start working with them, they got 50 employees, and then 2 years later, they got 500 employees.
Wow.
And that's just like straight up SaaS revenue on the top line. They're growing really, really quickly. And so being able to understand expansion revenue, but also the importance of the renewal of that existing client and how important that is to you is just so important. And it kind of links in, I know we chatted about this the other day, but that kind of health score. And people are quite simplistic. People love simple, red, amber, green. Like, what's the product engagement of this customer on my product, and how likely are they to renew? Because if that person leaves, I've actually got to work the top of the funnel even harder. Whereas if I can nail the renewal, I've hit all the milestones on that journey. I'm guaranteed that recurring revenue, and the upsell or the expansion I've also benefited from is way, way better. Probably a lot cheaper, or definitely a lot cheaper than acquiring a new customer.
Oh God, 100%. I mean that. I know, Maggie, you're agreeing with that. I mean, that is something that everyone's working on and recognizes, and perhaps Jack is going to touch on some new features of HubSpot that might work towards solving that. Johnny, we're almost out of time on our chat, but I suppose, is there anything else that you want to say about RevOps? Because I mean, in a sense, Maggie's going to get into it from HubSpot point of view, but I guess from my point of view, you've touched on some of the key elements of it, which is metrics, which is about being joined up. I probably underestimate that team training thing. Is there a last word on RevOps for us before we move over?
Yeah, I think the last thing for me is, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot, which is almost getting rid of the concept internally of departments like marketing and sales and customer success.
Yeah.
And actually, whether you call it revenue operations, whether you call it marketing, whether you call it go to market, however you can construct that in your mind internally, I think is incredibly important. And the reason I say that is because for a long time, everyone talked about silos, right? Business silos, it's a real buzzword. And one thing I'm very, very proud of that we've managed to achieve at Learnably is we've got real collaboration and unity across our marketing team, our sales team, and our customer success team. And what that actually translates into is my sales team sitting with my marketing guy and him telling them how matched audiences works in a platform like LinkedIn. So that if we want to run a marketing campaign to target a specific audience, the sales team give the marketing team the list, and then we go and market to these people, and then we can be joined up in our outbound activity and our marketing activity. And then the principle applies with customer success. Why don't you have customer success people joining sales calls, or why don't you have marketing people joining sales calls? Because ultimately we all want to spend more time with our customer, because if we spend more time with our customer, we actually understand the job to be done. And if we understand the job to be done, we can sell more effectively and more efficiently. And all of that combined helps you grow more quickly. So I think my sort of too long didn't read on that is, if you are working as independent teams, sales, marketing, and customer success, you are probably growing slower than you could do if you all sat down together and worked on your go-to-market strategy as a single function.
Wow. Well, that is brilliant advice, Johnny. Thank you so much. It's brilliant to hear from you with such energy and passion as well. You're right at the front line. You're doing this. You're having great success. So hopefully everybody that's listening today can take inspiration from that. So thanks very much, Johnny. We'll talk to you later. So, Maggie.
Hello.
How are you doing? No more silos, you said in the chat there, which is great.
I did say that. No more silos. I know when Johnny was talking, there are so many things that, gosh, ring so true. And I think, one of the things about RevOps that's really important, no matter where you are, if you started with it, this is the first time you're hearing about it. It's a mindset, it's a practice, it's something that you can start today, regardless of what's happening at your company. Even if you sit in these departmental silos, as we call them, there are still ways that you can practice RevOps if you believe in the philosophy that working together, being unified, being aligned, will catapult your growth beyond working in silos. So really cool stuff.
Brilliant. So Maggie, do you want to, before you get into your slides, do you want to tell us briefly about your background and what
Yeah,
today?
Happy to. So I come from a product management and product marketing background. That's really where I cut my teeth in tech companies here in Boston. And one of the things I realized very quickly is my love for process, my love for infrastructure, my love for how things work, and really solving those kind of problems. So I actually spent the last 5, almost 6 years in an operations role at HubSpot. And we really reached this point where a couple big things were sort of coming together. One, the emphasis on how important the operations function at HubSpot was really coming to light. 2, we know we really wanted to build a hub and build features and a product for folks like that. And 3, HubSpot traditionally has been creating content and education and resources for marketers, for sales reps, for services reps, these go-to-market teams. And one of the things we really needed to do is create these resources for who we call builders. And, there's a lot of different types of folks who like to build. Sometimes they know code and they're developers. Sometimes they are NO code, like a traditional or typical operations person. And so that's what I'm working on now. I'm leading a team of folks who are really interested in solving and serving the personas who like to build. So developers and RevOps professionals.
Awesome. Maggie, before we get into your slides, Timothy Meridrew has been talking about some stuff. He's looking at the newer features of HubSpot to link to other systems they previously used as the center for our operations, e.g. ERM, but want to be able to centralize on HubSpot. So I think that question, well, feel free to jump in on that anytime, Maggie, but I think that'll be one for Jack later on.
Yeah, I think it will be. One of the things that Johnny talked about, I wrote down was, connectivity is so important. And if you're not in operations or you haven't really spent any close time with someone who does that kind of work, one of the big challenges today in an operations role is just managing that tech stack. Sometimes you inherit a stack or even try to build a stack where, think about HubSpot, right? This was one of my jobs on the marketing team. We had hundreds of marketers who are using free tools, paid tools, trying to connect them to 53 and trying to manage all of that work, not only from a documentation and just how it works standpoint, but also, is this going to work for us in the future? Is this scalable? Is this a repeatable process that we're going to be able to build on? That's really one of the biggest challenges that I think operations folks face today, is not only just trying to keep up with all of the technology, but being able to be really innovative and forward thinking about what you're going to need in the next 2, 3, 4 years. And are the integrations that you're implementing, are the apps that you're buying, is the enablement that you're providing on top of all of that really going to serve your customer, which, is those go-to-market teams.
Totally, 100%.
Yeah. So I do have a presentation I'd love to share with you all. Johnny covered a lot of this. And one of the things I wanted to share today was a little bit about HubSpot and how we're kind of thinking about RevOps. And, I mentioned that one of the reasons that we really got into this concept and really adopted it and really, really have gotten into it at HubSpot is because companies that are looking to grow, companies that are looking to scale, generally are not set up to do so, especially for their operations team. So I want to walk you through this story that talks a little bit about that. So, I mentioned scale, and most companies, you're looking to grow, you're looking to scale, but how does a company actually do that, right? What is the answer? Everybody knows where they want to be, but how do you actually get there? And so, let's talk about what we actually mean when we talk about scale. So when I say scale, I'm really talking about that scale is when the business is growing faster than the investments. So it's really about, it's when users and partners and customers and revenue grow faster than the investments that you're making in that area, right? And that's the dream. That means you've built a really effective internal machine. But man, that is a lot easier said than done. And not a lot of companies to date, right, have really been able to effectively make this transition from growth to scale. And part of that is because it's very, very hard. We're talking a lot about breaking down silos, making sure that you've got North Star metrics, really digging through all of the data that you have and finding what really matters. But the important point to note about all that is that there's really no playbook for that, right? This is truly uncharted territory for a lot of folks. I love this slide, so we're going to come back to it. So remember it. And so I want to tell you a little bit about the challenges that companies face when they're looking to scale. And at HubSpot, we really tend to focus on these 3 challenges. And when I'm done, Johnny, I would love to hear what you think about these challenges too. So the first one is about the customer experience. Johnny mentioned customer is king. You're going to hear from HubSpot. Maybe you feel this yourself. We are always trying to solve for the customer. Everything we do has the customer at its center. Let me sidestep here for a second. In our RevOps department, which is led by Allison Elworthy, our EVP, we have sales, we have marketing and services. All of those operations departments are together. But there's actually also two other teams that are included in those departments. The first one is enablement. So we work really hard to unify and align and keep all of the enablement that we do for these go-to-market teams under one roof. Because just like Johnny mentioned, you want to teach your sales team exactly what the marketers are doing. You want to teach your services go-to-market reps exactly what's happening in that flywheel before anyone gets to them, so that they really can really have that full context of what's happening. The other team under the roof, so those 3 operations teams, we've got enablement. We also have a actual go-to-market strategy team that is head up by someone who has really done the work for the last several years at HubSpot of building our annual and 3-year plan. And why that is so important to RevOps is because we really try to build our go-to-market strategy right on top of the voice of the customer. We have built a voice of the customer team. We are serious about the feedback that we get from folks like you, our partners, everybody. And when we consider what the next 3 years at HubSpot looks like, a big slice of that is, what do our customers need and how do we build an infrastructure that's really going to support them? So this customer experience challenge is the first one that we think about. And, the reason this customer experience tends to get lost as companies grow is because, just like Johnny said, these functional operations teams are set up in silos, and they kind of end up approaching the customer experience from their own silo. Alison Elworthy calls this a function out strategy. So here's a really tangible example of this. I don't know if you've recently needed support from a company and you've gone on their website, they've got a great chat bot, you're chatting away. Yes, here's my problem. Yes, here's what I need. And that doesn't always solve the problem, right? You might get passed to a human, or you might need to call them a couple days later. And then when you call them, they don't have the information that you chatted them about. So you end up repeating yourself on the phone. It might take an extra hour or two. That is the worst feeling. And what's actually just happening there is that company is moving so fast, perhaps growing so fast, or even just isn't set up internally to connect the conversations that each of those go-to-market reps are having. The sales folks or a bot might be the person on the website. You get a call that's actually, you're going right to the services department. No one's talking to each other. And from a customer experience standpoint, that feels terrible. And this is just a symptom of growing very fast and growing up in silos. So it's really one of the big challenges that companies face when they're looking to scale. The second one is trying to stay big and fast. And when you're a small company, it's really easy to work closely with your peers and innovate and launch new ideas. I was thinking about this the other day when we're all together in an office and you sit next to each other and there's somebody across the way. Hey, there's a problem on the website. How do you think we should fix that? It's a typo. Oh, you're going to fix that? Great. Let's just do it. I mean, that happens in a snap. But then all of a sudden, you grow as a company, you open new offices, you're hiring remotely, you're growing these teams, there's new processes, there's new ways of working. It becomes very difficult to just sort of GSD and implement the things that need to be done at a fast pace. And so, adding headcount and adding extra processes can sort of just add up over time. And then all of a sudden, instead of being big and moving fast, you just become big and slow. And that's a real problem.
Maggie, I was going to, as you say this, Is it possible to give a sense of your HubSpot scale and speed that is growing just to the audience? Because obviously, I'd love to know how many people are in these teams and how many staff. I know it's like a ridiculous number, but how many new staff you're adding every year, etc.
Yeah, so we don't publish exactly how many employees or what our headcount exactly is, but I'll tell you that over the last couple of years, particularly in the operations teams, we've gone from 10 to 20 to 30. And in these go-to-market reps, in the marketing team and the sales team and the services team, I mean, we're growing into hundreds, and I'm going to talk a little bit in a second about that correlation between revenue and headcount. That can be a real problem. Actually, I'm going to talk about it right now. And that's where some of the efficiency can be a big challenge. So, the most obvious way for a company to grow is invest in headcount, right? But this linear way of growing becomes so expensive and truly not sustainable. It doesn't work as you scale. So I know I showed this slide before. I really like it. So imagine that blue line right there is headcount, right? And the orange line is revenue. And so usually, right, the linear way of growing is you're hiring more headcount, the more revenue you have. You make more money, you hire more people, you get more customers, you need more services reps. You want more sales reps, you need services reps to sustain the amount of leads they're bringing in, right? But that's not sustainable, and that's really not how you scale. So one of the things that we're trying to do at HubSpot right now is what we call break linear growth. So how can we continue to make more money without adding more headcount? How are we going to do that? Hot tip, the answer is RevOps. So these are those challenges that are really keeping companies up at night as they try to scale. It's these challenges, again, keeping up the customer experience as you grow, staying big and fast and not becoming big and slow, and trying to break linear growth. And what's the problem, right? Those are challenges on their own. But what happens to companies when they get to this point is that they reach another roadblock, which is the team or the people who are usually tasked with solving these problems. It's your operations team. And like I mentioned before, these teams are just usually not set up for success. They're overwhelmed. they're often reactively fighting problems that are caused by the friction of your growing, right? Imagine the scenario where someone comes and complains to you about that experience I just talked to you about, right? They've got the chat, they're having the call. It's usually your operations teams that has to back into, okay, what are the technologies that are being used on the website that are being used to reach that services folks? How are we going to connect them? Are they connected in the right way? What is the data telling us about the handoffs that are happening there? And generally, most operations teams right now at companies are just not set up to really adequately solve those problems. And it's really hard to just keep that flywheel spinning. Johnny mentioned this earlier too. So, one way that we're really not set up for success right now specifically is we're wrangling a ton of tools all the time. And I mentioned this, but one of my big initiatives when I was working in operations was to figure out what is really the platform that we should be using as a marketing team, right? Not only in the sense of let's make a central repository of who's using what, how many seats do we have, how much does that costing us, what is the renewal process, but then also how does that tech stack fit into how sales is running their processes, how services reps are getting information from these two other teams. And so that's a real good example of a function out problem where functionally we're just solving for marketing and those platforms and what we're using for tech, but in reality we need to take a step back and say, man, as a whole RevOps department, we really need to be totally aligned on what we're using and how we're using it and how we enable folks to use it so that there's that connection that's created right at the outset. I keep mentioning this responsibility because truly it was one of the most painful things I had to do. It was a ton of manual work, which is what a lot of operations folks end up doing. There are so many great ideas that come into any company, especially at HubSpot, right? We're a whole bunch of smart people just like you. We have a lot of great ideas, but a lot of times these great ideas are just set up and then left to work on their own. And that's where the problem starts, right? It's usually operations who's meant to really manage these processes. And that could be a problem. So I don't want to tell you all of these things, share all of these problems with you without giving you the better way of how to do things. And of course, why we're here, right, is the better way is RevOps. RevOps can really be an answer to all of the problems that I talked about, whether that is the scaling problems that a company is having or the challenge that folks in operations are facing, trying to really just keep things alive. So the way that we define RevOps at HubSpot is we call it the practice, the mindset, the practice, and the manifestation of unifying your internal operations. And this is all done in the spirit of creating a frictionless customer experience. We believe that in order to create a frictionless outside external customer experience, you have to create a frictionless internal infrastructure that really just runs on its own with alignment, unification, being able to strategize together, automating all of those things. It's just so important. And so, in the old world, a little bit like what Johnny was talking about, and I say the old world because that's how we're thinking about it at HubSpot, but it's really sort of like the current world, right? Folks are just sitting in those silos. They're sitting within those functions. And like I mentioned, Allison calls this a function out strategy. And it's really the reason that the customer experience gets lost, right? We really want to have a customer in strategy where we are taking the customer experience, having the operations teams really feel ownership of that customer experience. Because even though you are serving those go-to-market reps, right? The marketers, the sales reps, the services reps, they in turn are serving your customer. And so all of the work, all of the processes and enablement and the things that you as an operations person hands those people, they're turning around and using that to create the customer experience on the other side. So this is where we really want to switch that function out strategy to a customer in strategy. And so here are some of the key ways that we feel that RevOps really helps companies run better. So, RevOps is changing the world of operations and helping companies scale first by integrating siloed go-to-market operations onto one team, right? This is a little bit of like of a mindset that you can adopt without doing it. But man, life is so much easier if you can really just get everybody on the same team, under the same roof, so to speak, so that they're just working with each other. Then what you want to do, and really a big baseline of doing a good job here, is building a unified operating rhythm for the company, right? Because when you unify your teams and you have that North Star metric that Johnny talked about, it becomes about one mission, right? One winning aspiration, one strategy, one unified RevOps team. One of the things that we talk a lot about at HubSpot is this line that culture eats strategy for breakfast. You may have heard this before, but at HubSpot, our Chief Customer Officer, Yamini, what she says is alignment eats strategy for lunch. So culture eats strategy for breakfast, but alignment eats strategy for lunch, because you can have an A+ world's best top-notch strategy, but if you are not unified and aligned about what it's actually going to take to make that work, it's not going to work. Like Johnny said, you might experience growth, you might experience more money, but at a very, very slow pace, or at least much slower than what you could be doing with RevOps. We care a lot about alignment, because that's really how you overcome that speed challenge as you grow, so that you can stay big and fast and not big and slow. So RevOps is about aligning systems. It's about aligning data. It's about aligning enablement, so that you can really drive efficiency from the inside out. And then, when you do all of these things, once you're unified, you get aligned and you are able to strategize in that customer first way, this is where the magic happens. Because at that point, then you're also allowing for innovation, which is really the dream state for a lot of ops folks. I've spent 2 years talking to as many people as I can about this. And one of the things that we all have in common is a lot of our jobs are so reactive. So sometimes it can be a lot of ticket intake, or it can be a lot of, oh my gosh, this is on fire. Can you help me? What are we going to do? And in reality, these folks are some of your most strategic business partners if you would give them a seat at the table. The amount of data that they're looking at all the time, what they can see from an outside view of being able to connect the dots, is truly unreal. But they're just not able to get there based on how they're set up and sometimes treated at the companies that they're working at. So, unify your teams, you get them aligned around the goal, you build that go-to-market strategy on top of the voice of the customer. Also being able to automate the duplicative work, that is so, so, so important for RevOps, because once you start to unify and align all those teams under one roof, you're able to see what everyone's actually doing. This is why documentation is so important. And then once you get to that point, right, you're able to innovate. So now, right, you're freed up to work on those big, ambitious ideas that are really needed to break linear growth. And so, RevOps is really the revolutionary way that you're moving those operations pros from a place of being reactive firefighters that just sort of keep that flywheel spinning into those strategic business partners I mentioned, where they're able to proactively remove the friction. That's so important, to proactively be able to remove it so that you can accelerate your flywheel even faster. So that's how we're thinking about RevOps. And the most important thing that we're talking about today, right, is I just talked a lot about strategy, how to get that mindset, what it takes to actually manifest it and practice it. But what Jack's going to come in and talk to us about is, in order for you to do this right, it's really twofold. You, of course, need the strategy, but then you also need to equip these folks with the right tools in order to do that. And so at HubSpot, when we see these challenges and an underserved persona like RevOps, we don't want to just write the new playbook, right? We want to be able to write the playbook and also build the software to execute that too. So this is where Operations Hub comes in. So yeah, that's how HubSpot's thinking about RevOps.
Wow, Maggie, thank you so much. And
You're so welcome.
I mean, obviously, if you guys are doing it, I mean, like, one of the things is, should people be doing this? And I just say, well, HubSpot are doing it. Just
yeah,
do it.
Yeah.
And so, Johnny, obviously listening to that, and it really aligns with, I think, what Johnny's trying to do and some of the things that he said. Are there any comments, Johnny, from what Maggie said there?
Hey, thanks, Maggie. That was super interesting.
Yeah.
Always nice to hear into the belly of the beast of how you're doing it. I mean, some fascinating feedback. Obviously, it's always very difficult when you're in a much smaller company to try and relate to bigger organizations. And it's much easier when, you've got bigger budgets, bigger teams, you've got people who can spend time researching these things. And it's sort of, it can be over romanticized in terms of, oh, well, that's easy for HubSpot because, you've got lots of people that can make this happen. But I think that if you boil it down to your own business, whether you go based on the 3 bullet points, which is how are my people in those functions connected to customer experience, and what's the relationship, what's the feedback loop, how do we translate that feedback loop into our value proposition, how do we translate that customer experience back into potentially a growth experiment that we're trying to run in our business.
Yes.
Because ultimately both of those things for me link back to speed. So speed is actually just about failing faster and faster and faster. And the more that you can fail faster, the more that you learn, whether that's in marketing, in sales, in customer success, or revenue operations. Like, you're going to have to break some stuff. You
are going to have to break some stuff. It's so true. Okay. It is okay. And not only is it okay, it should be welcomed. It should be celebrated. You have to do it. One of the things that we're working on right now is creating a unified experimentation framework that everybody works on. And the point of doing that is so that we can safely and together fail fast and fail often, because that's the only way we're going to learn. That doesn't change if you're a 2-person company up to 1 million, that part never changes. But what is very hard, if you are not set up correctly with the right infrastructure to do that, how are you actually taking those learnings and putting them into your go-to-market strategy? How are you even deciding what to experiment on if you're not unified around the data and the mission that you're on? It really takes a real infrastructure setup to be able to fail fast and fail often. And you also need the other end of it, which is like, well, what are we doing with all this information once we do it? We really need to create that flywheel of being able to take the feedback, implement it, see what works, and then really implement it or try again. Totally right.
Yeah, and I particularly enjoy the piece around that you talked about at the end there around firefighting. Quite often in companies and the society we live in is around, right, I've got to answer that notification on my phone, and I've got to do the next thing, and actually, if you can step back and give yourself the time and reflection. I think there's an interesting case study. I think it was something like the CEO of maybe even Pfizer or GSK. He used to have an hour in his diary where he would the CEO of a multi-million, billion-dollar company, and he would just sit in his office for an hour because this whole thing up here needs time to digest.
Absolutely.
And that's why, it sounds corny, but the customer experience point, the speed that you can maybe test and iterate on, or the efficiency, it will come when you're standing in the shower or you're mowing the lawn.
It will.
Because the brain is free and able to develop those thoughts. And it's that point in time where right, okay, if I go back and if we just, what happens if we disconnect that tool that everyone says is sort of not working, and we go from 137 to 136 apps? Like, what actually happens? Is the business going to stop tomorrow?
Yes.
If we learn from that.
Probably not. No.
Probably not. That's one less thing you've got to teach people when they're on board. It's all those things.
I know. And I think part of what can be tough if you're not supported from the top down to do this is setting some of those parameters and boundaries. Like, we talk a lot about permissions at HubSpot. So who has permissions to, just on the tech stack example, who has permissions to get new apps? Who has permissions to integrate it into 53? We care so much about autonomy, but there's this point where, what I always say is that I really want to create people swim lanes so that they can swim as fast as they want, but they're safe to do so within the lanes of the pool. And that's really an operation person's job, is to create the swim lanes, give folks the runway to experiment and do what they want to do, because they are the experts in some of that stuff, right? But we as operations folks are the experts in setting up the platforms, whether that is the actual tech, the processes, the enablement, the perspective with data to actually do those things in a safe way.
One thing I was interested in asking you, which you kind of, or I wasn't sure if it was sort of elation or positive frustration, but you talked about documentation. How does a business as large as HubSpot think about documentation? Because obviously you're very good at writing up how the platform works. But how do you think about documentation? Because obviously if you're building and iterating on processes to function in its own right, to document it, and that documentation goes out of date very quickly if you're operating speed and efficiency.
Yeah. So I think I'll speak from my personal experience. Documentation to me is, I love documentation. So I always approach it as like, of course, this should just be part of how you set up a new process, part of how you enable. I think it can take folks a little bit of time to really come up over the other side and say, okay, I understand why I need to document it. And one of the examples that you gave was perfect, and here's how we say it at HubSpot. You know, if I win the lottery tomorrow, how am I going to pass on the work that I do to somebody else? And I think that one of the things you got to get in the habit of understanding is documentation is not a chore. It's actually something that helps you scale, helps you create that repeatable process, is critical to unification and alignment, and is something that, I mean, I hope in years to come, it's not even a question about whether you should do it. It's more about, well, how much should we document, and who needs to see it, and all of those types of things. So I think at HubSpot, the mindset around documentation has really changed over the last couple of years. We like to move fast. We like to go, 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 go. And sometimes if you're thinking about documentation wrong, it can feel like a roadblock, when in reality, it's actually an accelerator.
Brilliant. Well, guys, thanks for that conversation. By the way, I just love the analogy of if I win the lottery.
I know.
Because I don't know if it's maybe it's a British thing, but we use the phrase, if I get run over by a bus tomorrow, who's going to... It's just much more positive.
They both work. They both work.
That's so good. So right now, we're going to move over to Jack, who is a senior sales solutions engineer at HubSpot. And Jack, you're going to tell us about the operations hub. And I know Johnny's been excited about this as well, because I'm sure there's bits of this that Johnny's going to want to use straight away. So over to you, Jack.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen and we'll jump straight in. Let's make sure that this is showing up there. In a moment, you should hopefully see some slides.
Yep.
So I don't want to spend time in this deck at all. I just wanted to maybe preface what I'm about to show you with these three main points here. Effectively, obviously based on what Johnny and Maggie have been talking about, it's very clear that operations teams and RevOps teams are overwhelmed by the different responsibilities and requirements of them internally to make sure that everyone is able to do their jobs efficiently and ultimately get the business to grow. And ultimately, what Operations Hub aims to do here is solve that by following three core pieces of functionality. The first is data sync, which allows you to very quickly and easily sync data from an external system into HubSpot in a bidirectional manner, in a two-way fashion. So if data changes in an external location, that is reflected in the HubSpot CRM and vice versa. So that ensures that any of the teams are really operating and using the most up-to-date information at all times, and aims to solve that big problem that a lot of companies face around data silos, where you end up with data that is pocketed off from different teams and different systems, and things start to get a little bit out of line. The second thing as well is that when that data is syncing over, we need to ensure that the information that is synced is of a high standard, that it's cleansed, that it's been validated correctly. And that's where data quality automation comes into play. That's basically looking at, for example, it could be something as simple as someone's name and ensuring that it's capitalized correctly for the purposes of email marketing, or looking at some input someone has given on a website and ensuring that there's no white spaces or any kind of irregular characters in that. So ensuring that the data that has synced is of a high quality. And then finally, which is probably where I particularly enjoy this aspect of the Operations Hub, is the programmable automation, which is really the ability to solve for very bespoke business processes from right inside of HubSpot. So that could be anything from querying another system to validate data or pull data in or check data. It could be managing SLAs in respect to maybe tickets on the services side. It could be, to Johnny's point earlier around renewals, it could be that we automate processes when a deal comes to the end of its contract date, that we have a piece of programmable automation that is executed that will clone that deal in its entirety, including the attachments, and add that to a renewals pipeline. So the programmable automation is a really, really interesting aspect of this. And we're going to be looking at all of this right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the first screen here, which is our data sync component. And right now with HubSpot, we have got 37 connectors on our ecosystem. This is a list that's growing each and every day. We are continuing to expand on this. But these connectors that we see here allow you to synchronize data between those respective systems and the HubSpot system in a bidirectional manner. The data at present that it supports is contact-based information, and we're also going to expand on that in the future, bringing out support for additional types of records as well. There's quite a lengthy list here, so I kind of encourage you to check this out yourselves. What I'm going to focus on for the purposes of demonstrating today is show you how the Pipedrive connector works. And for all intents and purposes, it's really a copy and paste regardless of the system you're integrating, which I think is a really nice aspect of the Operations Hub and HubSpot in general, is that the interface is a kind of a one-size-fits-all approach. So you're not reinventing the wheel each and every time you connect a new system. It's all uniform and very mainstream. So this integration here, if we scroll down towards the bottom, you'll see that it will sync a couple of default fields between the systems. But also with Operations Hub, you've the ability to sync additional fields and any custom fields you may have as well. So like any company, you're naturally going to have additional fields that you've added to those systems to hold data that is particularly important to your business and your customers. So this can facilitate all of that as well. And how that looks effectively is if I click into my HubSpot account. So we're now within a HubSpot portal, and we're looking at the Pipedrive connector that is part of our data sync. And you can see here that we're syncing people in Pipedrive to contacts in HubSpot. That sync is on. I could absolutely sync more data if I wanted and connect other applications. But in this instance, what I'm going to do is click on Edit, Sync Settings, to show you how I've configured this. So the technology that we're looking at now is actually heavily influenced by PySync, which was a platform we acquired, I think it's nearly 2 years ago at this stage. And this is the ultimately what's driving this behind the scenes. That is the engine that's making all of this possible. From within here, we are able to take a look at various different types of people on the Pipedrive side. So these can be segmented based on filters, let's say. And again, this is very much dependent on the system you connect. And we can control who we want to sync over. On the HubSpot side, we can choose to sync all contacts or potentially no contacts if you want that one-way sync where Pipedrive maybe is the source of truth. But we are also able to segment based on the list that people are on or control the sync based on the list that people are on. So for argument's sake, let's imagine, HubSpot, naturally, you'll be doing a lot of inbound lead generation and things like that. The CRM is going to fill up naturally over time based on your activity with those campaigns. Maybe you only want to sync SQLs or people that have a certain HubSpot score or lead score to another system. You don't want to be just sending everything and anything over. These types of sync filters allow you to basically have that type of control. There's a couple of other important settings to keep in mind as well, is that within HubSpot particularly, the email address is the unique identifier. And that really serves a very important process in that it prevents duplication of data. So you're never going to have a situation where two contacts exist with the same email address, let's say. Of course, that isn't the way with other systems for various different reasons, which is fine. But it is optional to decide to choose whether you want to sync contacts with or without email address. Again, that's very use case dependent, but something to consider. Also down here as well, if in the event of a situation whereby, let's say HubSpot and Pipedrive kind of clash heads and we're not sure which system should take precedence, this setting is there to solve for that. So you can actually say, in the unlikely event that it's a little bit like on an airplane, in the unlikely event that we have to land in water, In the unlikely event that there is a collision of data, we can decide if Hubspot should take priority or Pipedrive should take priority. So there's that safety net as well. And these are obviously all of those sync settings. You'll see here on the field mappings tab as well. This is where I'm adding the data mappings themselves. So again, name to first name, we can enable them and disable them as we need to. We can also add new mappings. So I can click add a new mapping, choose the respective field in the other system, and obviously choose the property then on the HubSpot side that should map to. So to give you a sense now of what that looks like, because we're talking a lot about setting it up, let's just take a look at Elon Musk here. I just have a developer account here, but Elon Musk is here in this external system, in this instance Pipedrive. A couple of things I want to point out is you can kind of see his name is a little bit off because he forgot to turn caps off or something like that. Maybe his phone number isn't correctly formatted. There's a couple of just irregular pieces of information here that we just need to clean up. Elon Musk, though, also exists within HubSpot. And this is exactly what his record looks like here. And all of this information you see was synced across thanks to data sync. And should any data here change, will be reflected on the Pipedrive side. Now, what I'm going to do, because obviously this is kind of something I created earlier, just to keep me perfectly honest on this call, I'm going to add a person in the background here. So while I'm talking through this, let's just go with Adam, and we're going to just put in BBD, and let's pop in just a phone number, and there's Adam's email address. And Adam, I apologize if you get any weird emails from me, because I do a lot of testing in this account. So, but I just want to show, by the end of this demonstration, all going to plan, you will have synced over, and a lot of the stuff I show you will have been applied to your contact record. So I think it will really add some extra validation. So let me save that here. And that's fine. So now we'll forget about that till later on. But let's firstly look at Elon Musk now. You'll notice that we've got some information about Elon Musk. That's great. We can see that, his phone number, he's an opportunity, that type of thing. We can navigate that as we like. But if I scroll down as well, you'll actually see that I've also configured my account to validate or verify his email address. So this is something I typically talk to customers a lot about, and this is what got me thinking about this, is that there are so many email verification systems out there that ensure that the email not only is syntactically valid, but is also a legitimate or live email address. It's not uncommon, for instance, for people to supply a dummy email address or a free mail email address on a form to convert for the purposes of getting a piece of content, which is fine. But if you then go to reach out to that individual, it can be a waste of time. Or alternatively, if you're emailing a whole load of email addresses that haven't correctly been validated, it can impact deliverability. So Kickbox Email is a verification service. There are loads out there. I just happened to choose Kickbox because I was more familiar with it. And what I've done here in the background, and I'll show you this shortly, is when Elon was created in this account, I took his email address, I sent a request to Kickbox, and I said, can you verify this for me? Kickbox sent back some information. You can see here, obviously, I guessed Elon Musk's email address, so it's come back as risky and low deliverability. And it's coming back with a couple of other, a score based on an algorithm they run to say the likelihood of deliverability and, whether it's a role-based email, like a sales ad or an info ad. So a lot of different information. And again, this is very much dependent on the system you use. But this was all facilitated by the programmable automation behind the scenes. You'll also notice that Elon's name is correctly formatted, which is great. So we'll look at how that was done. And you'll see as well, Elon is linked to Tesla. And if we click into Tesla, we've got the company information. And you'll see here that I've actually integrated with a third party called Clearbit, which is a B2B data enrichment platform. Loads of like a really, really rich database of information that it can populate based on company information. And it's coming back with, Alexa ratings, domain aliases owned by that company, Latin long geo coordinates. What I think is particularly useful is if we go down here, they tag companies and they also group it by the type of technologies that they're using. So, this is information potentially in a real world that my sales team or maybe my marketing team would use to tailor their outreach. And this was all made possible by the programmable automation behind the scenes. So if we take a look now at how all of that is working. So I'm going to click into the first tab here, and this is the first workflow. This is HubSpot's automation tool. People use it for a variety of different things: lead nurturing, sales lead assignment, automating internal processes, copying data from one record to another. In this instance, what I've done is I've said that anytime a contact is created, I want to do something. So in this instance, I am getting their first name, I am validating that data, I'm converting everything to a lowercase, and then I'm correctly capitalizing that so it's output in a nice and clean format. And what makes that possible, first of all, is if I click on the little plus icon, is this format data action, which is a part of Operations Hub. And what this allows you to do is choose a piece of information relating to the record that is enrolled in this automation. And what we can then do is we can execute a variety of different formula on that information. So some common ones that I've seen for the case of names is changing to title case. Maybe you want to convert a date format to something that's more relevant to your business when you're doing events, or you might want to do some kind of calculations. So there's a whole lot of predefined formula here for you to leverage, and that's ultimately what's responsible, first of all, for making sure Elon's name is correctly displayed, so that it doesn't look very robotic when we send him an email, let's say. But the other pieces too of this, you may have remembered I was asking Kickbox, that external service, to validate an email for me. So what I've done here is I've created a contact workflow, and I have said if a contact is created, or if they fill in a form, or I could say as soon as I know their email address. What I'm doing now is I'm running a piece of custom code, which is the programmable automation component of the Operations Hub. And what this allows us to do, and I have documentation and articles that I've published, which I'll share afterwards, which goes into a lot more detail on this. But essentially, if I click on this, this gives you the ability to run your own JavaScript code in a Node runtime environment to theoretically do whatever you like, so long as the appropriate APIs exist. You can see here in this instance, I'm importing some libraries so that I can make a request to an external system, and then I'm basically asking that external system for some information, and it's sending me data back. And what you'll also see down here is that the data that I get back, I can set as a data output. So you'll see here, data output can be a variety of different types of data. It could be a Boolean, or a true or false value, or a string, or a date, or whatever the case may be. And I can actually copy that information into properties, and I can begin to then implement a sort of an if-then logic. So in this instance, if for whatever reason Kickbox says that this is an invalid email, there's just no SMTP response, just simply doesn't exist. Elon may have had the best intentions of converting on the form, but the email is just a dummy email address. I may choose to delete that contact, or stamp that contact, or blacklist that contact, or add them to a suppression list. So I'm not wasting my time, and I'm preserving my overall deliverability. Another example too, we looked at the enrichment of data using a third party, particularly Clearbit in this instance. Quite a simple workflow. If a company is created, I just want to do something. And in this case, what I'm doing, again, without going through it line for line, and I will share walkthroughs and the code that I've used for if you want to take a deeper look. But what I'm doing is when a company is created, I'm taking that information and I'm querying Clearbit, and it's sending me back some information. And based on that, I'm doing something in the CRM, in this case, storing it in properties. And I think one useful thing, I think, because obviously I think most of the people are probably based around the UK. One thing that I've been using this for lately, and I'm actually working on a video that I'm hoping to share on LinkedIn in the coming days, is integrating this with Companies House, which is something that comes up a lot for me. I work pre-sale with the UK and Irish side of the business, and Companies House is probably more familiar to most of you on the call, is the kind of UK's registry of companies, and it has company numbers and information, and it's all very official. And people are always asking me if there's ways that we can actually validate information in our CRM based on what's in Company House. And prior to Operations Hub, it was possible, but it wasn't exactly easy, let's say. With Operations Hub now, we can very easily make a request to Companies House to say, do these IDs match? Can you give me the company information for XYZ? So there's just one way I wanted to flag, because it may be of particular interest to people based in the UK. And then I think finally,
I have a quick question for you, actually.
Yeah, sure.
My question was, I seem to have lost the camera. So just to be clear to everybody, so they with this programmable automation, they can go and call external APIs like you've shown here, but you can also call, if you like, the internal APIs of HubSpot. So you can go and get like very, very specific snippets of data from within HubSpot and bring them back in and surface it in a way that perhaps you couldn't have done through regular workflows.
Correct, and actually, so you absolutely can. You'll see in this instance, I'm actually looking at, I'm using the HubSpot Companies API to pull information about a company. Equally, I could use this now to get associated deals for that company or tickets for that company, and do something with that data. And for anyone maybe who is interested in exploring a more HubSpot-centric approach to how you can use this, I've built out a referral program that uses Operations Hub and Marketing Hub. So the idea of this, and this is something I'll share with you afterwards, is that people will sign up to join the referral program. They'll be issued a referral ID. They can share that with their friends. When their friends convert, Operations Hub will look through the HubSpot CRM and find someone who that ID is assigned to, and it will attribute that referral to them. So there are ways to use this with just HubSpot and use it in a very creative and powerful manner. And there are ways as well to use it with external systems based on whatever needs you may have.
Brilliant. Quick question from Timothy, and I think this may relate to the data sync side of things, but what happens when somebody changes their email address?
Yeah, so effectively, what will happen there in that instance is that the email address within HubSpot is a unique identifier. So if we go back to Elon Musk here, if his email were to change, emusk@tesla.com, that would simply just be reflected within the respective system. So behind the scenes, there is a couple of other indexing rules that are happening to ensure that we know that this specific record is Elon, and these are the properties linked to him. If a net new email address came through, let's say, we wouldn't necessarily map that to Elon unless it changed directly from the source. So yeah, it depends really. There are probably some edge cases where you may clone a record and change the email address, which could cause an issue. But again, the programmable automation, I've been using that to avoid issues like that, whereby if an email address comes in, I search the CRM for patterns in data, and I actually merge the two contacts. So there's loads of ways to kind of remedy that as well.
Nice.
Yeah, and I think that the last thing I just wanted to say was, I've shown you how you can talk to external systems like Kickbox and Clearbit, and potentially use HubSpot to do things like referrals. Maybe some of you out there have your own homegrown systems or your own web applications or your own mobile applications, let's say. In this example, what I'm doing is I'm actually, when something happens in HubSpot, I'm actually checking an external database that is just a homegrown system to see if that contact exists, and if it does, I will choose to do, you can see down here, X or Y. This could be used maybe for provisioning user licenses, or spinning up maybe a free trial if someone fills in a form. Loads of different ways to use this, but what I'll do as well is, finally, to keep me honest, you can see that Adam's synced over. Thankfully, I was a little bit nervous there because that it hasn't failed me yet, so that's good to see. And if we take a look at Adam's record, what we will see is we'll see on the left-hand side all of that information for Adam. We'll see that Adam's email address is deliverable, accepted, that's fine. We can see Adam's link to his company, BBD Boom. I can click into BBD Boom, and I can see that Clearbit's returned a load of information about the company, the location, and information around the technology that they're using. And this was all made possible by what I showed you today. And I appreciate that we covered a lot, and that it is definitely new territory for a lot of customers. But what I'd say too is that I have loads of resources that I can share after this. This article in particular runs through the 3 examples I've shown today, provides video walkthrough, provides the code, talks in more depth about it. This article, as I suggested or mentioned earlier, will actually walk you through creating a referral program step by step. There is also the ability to add this functionality into bots. So if you wanted to maybe have a bot, maybe query DHL's database to get an order status, or I've designed a bot here that uses Ticketmaster to suggest events if people provide a location, just to show you how this can be used. And finally, as well, there's been a lot of uptake with this, and people are very excited. So myself and a few colleagues, we're running weekly sessions on the HubSpot community. They're hour-long workshops where we basically dive into the intricacies of all of this, share screen, run through the code. So for anyone maybe who wants to dive deeper into that, I'd encourage you to register for those. They're going to be run for the next few weeks, depending on the numbers. So yeah, that's kind of everything from me on the operations hub side.
Brilliant, Jack. Thank you so much. You did an amazing job at explaining that, which is so new, so technical, so deep, and so many use cases. I mean, I know when we were talking recently, it's like, wow, well, what are the use cases? Well, yeah, like whatever you want, basically. If there's an API, you can do it. So that provides its own challenges. So thank you so much. So what I'm going to do now is just wrap up. Basically, what we've done today is we've had our first B2B Tech UK hug. So please stay in touch. We'll obviously stay in touch with you and tell you about the next things. Please contact me if you've got any questions about the hug or any specific HubSpot things that you want help with. We've also got a LinkedIn group as well, so please join that. And some of you will have joined the event today. You can also join what is called the chapter. And of course, when you join the chapter, as opposed to sign up to a specific event, you get notified about other things that are going on. So really, all I've got to do now is thank everybody for attending and joining us today. It's been great to get this first one underway. Remember, please do let us know your thoughts and ideas for future hugs. And of course, I'd like to thank Maggie, Jack, and Johnny for being brilliant hosts. We covered so much, and it was just fantastic having you.
Thanks for having us, Adam.
Thanks so much, guys. It was lovely, really enjoyable.
Brilliant. Thanks. And take care, everyone, and we'll see you at the next hug.
Cheers. See you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.